The hottest team in the country stayed hot as Penn State men's hockey swept Michigan and advanced to the Big Ten semifinals, but somehow they're still not guaranteed to make the NCAA tournament.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State men's hockey. Thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. We are the #1 daily Penn State sports podcast out there. And I'm the host, Zach Seyko. He is Eric Ohlson, Penn State men's hockey color commentator. Penn State goes on the road to Michigan, sweeps them, and now they have a semifinals match against Ohio State. So we're going to talk about all of it, how the Big Ten title is within reach. They could win the Big Ten tournament outright. We're going to preview Ohio State. First, let's get into the fact that, okay, is it a guarantee now with getting 2 more wins, quality wins against this Michigan team on the road? I saw a figure, Eric, that said it was 98% that Penn State of the likelihood that Penn State will make the NCAA tournament, but that still doesn't even lock them into the NCAA tournament. So you described before we even did this, a doomsday scenario where Penn State actually still doesn't make it. A win solidifies this against Ohio State, but what is the possibility that Penn State still doesn't make it if they do not defeat the Buckeyes in this 1-game series?
Yeah, unfortunately, that doomsday scenario is still in play. And I know, leading up to that series against Michigan, everyone was thinking, hey, win and you're in, sweep and you're in. And if some things had gone Penn State's way around the country, yeah, that probably would be the case. The good news is they took care of what they could control, and that was sweeping Michigan for the first time in Yost, the first team to ever sweep as a road team in the quarterfinal round of the Big Ten tournament. They're now the first team to ever win 2 road series in the quarterfinal round of the Big Ten tournament. So it was an unbelievable weekend. And I know there is probably a little frustration out there when I say that it's not guaranteed yet, because you're saying, gee, like, what else do they have to do? They're on this unbelievable run, right? This unbelievable run, unprecedented. They've made the climb of all climbs in the second half to get into the NCAA tournament, but it's still not a lock. And that's because of what's happening around the country, especially with Hockey East teams. Hockey East is killing them right now. UMass had a great weekend against Maine, who was number 4 in the Pairwise. They had a win and a tie against the Black Bears. So that killed Penn State, because if UMass had lost one of those games, they'd be behind Penn State right now. Penn State would be up to 11th in the Pairwise. Right now they're sitting at 12th.
Yes.
So it's Hockey East is killing them. Basically, what could happen should Penn State lose this game to Ohio State? Penn State falls back to within range of Quinnipiac. So Quinnipiac's 13th right now. When you're looking at the RPI, they're about 6 thousandths behind Penn State. And so if Penn State falls, they fall back basically neck and neck with Quinnipiac. Quinnipiac has a series with Brown coming up in the ECAC tournament. Quinnipiac wins, that series, they'll jump ahead of Penn State. So Penn State would now be at 13th, awaiting its fate still. And then you're looking at, again, kind of what we've talked about in the past, Zach, what leagues could steal bids. Yeah. Atlantic Hockey is stealing a bid. So there goes, let's just say, the 16th spot. CCHA may be stealing a spot. Minnesota State right now is on the right side of the bubble at 15th. So if they were to win out, they'd be in the tournament because they'll get the automatic qualifier, but they would be in the top 16 anyway. But should they lose early in the CCHA, now a second spot's getting taken. So there goes 15. Penn State's sitting there at 13. Now all of a sudden there's only 2 spots left, and they don't want to fall back to that 14th spot. They want to stay at 13, but 13 could even be taken from them as well if there's a upset in the NCHC. Right now you have Western and Denver. So when you're scoreboard watching, you want the teams ahead of Penn State to go and make a run, win their conference. You want the teams that are behind Penn State right now to lose and get upset in their tournaments. That keeps them safe regardless if they lose to Ohio State. But should an NCHC team make a run, upset, all of a sudden, maybe there goes spot number 14. And then you're really sweating at 13 because, again, anything could happen. What if there's a crazy upset in Hockey East, which probably won't happen because they have so many teams basically in the tournament right now. And then Notre Dame's still a factor,
Yeah.
And the Irish are going down easy. So they had a great upset. They go beat Michigan State. All of a sudden they're in the championship game, and who knows? I mean, it's a doomsday scenario because a lot of those things would really have to add up, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. So Penn State wins against Ohio State. They are in. That goes up to 100% because there's no chance then of them falling back out of the bubble with just one game remaining, the Big Ten championship. They would be safe. And of course, if they win and go and win the Big Ten championship, then they earn the automatic qualifier anyway.
What's nice is Penn State does control its own destiny, so they don't have to rely on all these different things. The simple solution is defeat Ohio State, which we are going to preview in the upcoming segment. Eric, so let's take a step back. You were out at Yost. You saw the series go down, and Penn State, they were able to outscore that Michigan offense in game one and then shut them down in game two. 6-5 in game one going into overtime, and then 5-2 in that second game. Overall takeaways here, I mean, the immediate one is that Penn State is still the hottest team in the country. But on top of that, they're able to win in a variety of ways, and that's what makes the best teams elite, is that on any given night, if it's defense, if it's offense, and then if you're able to couple that together, you get that result in game two. But to go into a hostile environment like Yost and do just that, I mean, Penn State looks like a team that can play with just about anybody. Whether it's Minnesota, they're out of this Big Ten tournament, but Michigan State would be on the horizon. I like their chances against Ohio State, but what did they show you anything different against Michigan that you didn't already know?
Not really. I think the biggest thing they showed was this is a resilient team and a mentally tough team. And that's kind of been the biggest thing they've been talking about in the second half is their mental toughness. There's such a fine line sometimes between winning and losing in hockey because within a game, there's 1,000 different roller coasters, and we saw that really Friday night where 3-1 lead after the first period. I certainly wasn't feeling comfortable because I've been to that building a lot of times and I've seen leads evaporate, in a blink of an eye. And that happened multiple times. Michigan kept coming back and coming back and coming back, tying the game. Penn State took another lead, and then Nick Moldenauer scored 6 seconds later. And you're like, oh my gosh, here we go again in this building. But they stayed with it. And even in the third period, when Michigan rallied and it ends up going to overtime, Penn State had a power play that carried over to start overtime. And you're thinking, oh, this is awesome. A chance to win it here. Start overtime on the power play. They had over a minute to work with. And unfortunately, they didn't score. Then you start thinking, oh, geez, like there goes the chance. We're playing this great road game. Michigan keeps coming back. And now, it's a one shot in overtime. You just feel like, geez, Michigan's probably going to win it here. But they just kept playing. Then Keaton Peters draws a tripping penalty, carrying the puck out of his own zone, back to the power play. And then we all know what happened there with J.J. Webush.
The freshman. Yep.
Yeah, scoring one of the best goals I've ever seen. And certainly worthy of what it ended up being the Sports Center #1 top play. And you win game one. And they've been leaning on the story of Penn State women's volleyball in the second half. You remember back to that national semifinal game against Nebraska where they're down, the backs against the wall, elimination set, and they're down, 22-16 or some margin like that. And they come back and win that set. And then another one, and they win set 5. A lot of people were watching that game, and they have talked about that since. And then again, what Penn State did in the national championship against Louisville, in Louisville's building, and they win. Guy in the coaching staff has been talking with the players about that moment. And, Katie Schumacher-Cawley actually talked with the team last week before going on the road. just about their experience and the resilience it takes in those moments to move on in those high pressure situations. And that's what they were going to have to do at Yost. So they survived game one. JJ Webush with a hat trick, the overtime winner. Now, all of a sudden, you put Michigan's back against the wall in game two, and you have a great opportunity to go do something you've never done, and that's sweep them in their building. And they played a great game two. Game two was really, really good. They were strong defensively. They didn't give up too many grade A's. When Michigan did had a couple of odd man rushes in the first period, Sergeyev made the saves. Arseni didn't play his best game Friday night. I think he'd probably be the first one to tell you that, even though the team still played decently in front of him defensively. When you see 5 goals, you're like, oh, that's tough. But that's also what Michigan can do. They have great shooters. But game two, he really played well. He made those key saves. He was better than Logan Stein, Michigan's netminder. And once Penn State opened up that lead, they never relinquished it this time. And they played with confidence. And, what a way to ice it. Charlie Serrato with a penalty shot goal to make it 5-2. And that's the quietest I've ever heard that building when he scored that goal. So they showed a lot of resilience. I knew they were going to be able to score goals against Michigan. The biggest question was, could they defend enough to get through that series? And that's exactly what they did.
Winning's contagious, so I'm glad you shared the story of Penn State women's volleyball and Katie Schumacher-Cawley going to talk to the team, because they have similar paths as far as they weren't the expected team to do this. And now, like I said, winning's contagious. So they're the hottest team in the country. They're going to continue to act that way. They go on the road to Columbus. Well, Ohio State doesn't really lose at home, but I like Penn State's chances. We're going to talk about it more coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find every deduction possible, file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. That is TurboTax.com/guarantees. And today's episode is also brought to you by Factor. Looking to optimize your nutrition this year? Well, Factor makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat in just 2 minutes. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every week, you can customize your meals to fit your lifestyle. So whether it's Calorie Smart or Protein Plus or Keto, plus Factor even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfasts, grab-and-go snacks to keep you fueled all day long. Factor takes the stress out of meal planning. You can try their Protein Plus meals, and they'll be packed with flavor, and they will keep you full throughout the day. The convenience is unbeatable. There's no prep, no mess. It's just great food in minutes. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50off and use code LockedOnCollege50off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That is code LockedOnCollege50off at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. So now the stakes are higher. It's a Big Ten semifinal, Penn State versus Ohio State. Ohio State, for what it's worth, I think in terms of the regular season series, certainly performed better than Penn State, but that wasn't this version of Penn State. This is not the same Penn State team that Ohio State had beaten earlier in the season when they had those two game series in the regular season. But Ohio State does not routinely lose at home. They are 15-4-1. Now, granted, they did struggle with this Wisconsin team, which I would have given Wisconsin minimal to no chance. They went out and they won 4-1, and then, they did win 4-1, and then they nearly defeated Ohio State in overtime. It took overtime in that game too, and then the Buckeyes won 3-2 in game 3. So it was very close to a team that I know that Penn State is head and shoulders better than Wisconsin. So now, with the way that momentum is, now don't get me wrong, when it's one and done, you win, you move on, you lose, you go home, and with where the stakes are for, I think it's fair to say both of these teams. Now Ohio State has a little more security since they're 10th in the pairwise, but you don't want to leave it up to chance, right? I still like where Penn State is. Like you said, that resilience, that mental toughness, the way that the freshmen and the younger players have grown up over the course of the season to really complete this team. But Eric, what is the difference on the ice that makes Penn State actually better this time around against the Buckeyes?
It's a fine line. These two teams are in so many ways carbon copies of each other, and they have been for a long time. When we're talking about what Steve Rawlick has done with Ohio State, he and Guy have, I know, a tremendous amount of respect for each other. They both feel like, they do it the right way. They both play styles that are winning hockey. They're strong defensively, good goaltending, deep up top, and score goals. Now, Penn State's advantages, I think they're deeper at forward than Ohio State. I think they have more goal scoring potential. Ohio State's got some really good players, though. Max Montez had a big weekend against Wisconsin, scored that game-winning goal in Game 3 in the third period. Riley Thompson's an excellent player on defense. They have Hanson Bukata he was a transfer from RIT. They have Damian Carfagna. That's their top pairing. They're outstanding, but Penn State can counter that with Cade Christensen and Simon Mack, who are its top pairing and are playing unbelievable hockey. You have Logan Turnus, who's kind of taken the net now for Ohio State after splitting time with Eberle for so much of the season. It's Turnus now. He played all 3 games against Wisconsin. His numbers are pretty good, and he and Sergeyev have history. They played together at UConn, so. Sergeyev got the best of him in that win at Pagula in Game 2. So it's kind of a toss-up in so many ways because these two teams always play what feels like a 1-goal game, where it's either a 1 goal or it's a 2 goal because the second one was an empty net. So there's that margin there. And I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but it's a ridiculous amount of games these two teams have played that end up being 1 goal or 2 goal with the empty net. It's tough to win. And lately it seems like they've been playing each other in the tournament too. Penn State has played, a couple 3-game series in Columbus, won 1, lost 1, and it's hard. So I think the key to success this weekend is going to be who scores that big goal and which goalie makes the timely save, because both teams are going to get their shots. Both teams play a style that they can kind of shut you down. Ohio State can really kind of tie you up in the zone defensively to not let you get to the dangerous areas of the ice where you want to be to score. And Penn State's certainly shown it can do that too. When Sergeyev is on, he's on, and he's a tough goalie to beat. So, that series they played back in the first half, at Ohio State, they didn't have Sergeyev. It was John Seifart's net because Sergeyev was still hurt. Seifert did his job. He did what he needed to do to give Penn State a chance to win. But that was back when we were talking about the team not playing complementary hockey. One game, they really didn't generate anything offensively, and they were just kind of hanging on defensively. And then Game 2 generated more offensively. They got shut out in Game 1. Game 2 scored a couple goals, but Ohio State got one, kind of midway through the third period, I think, to take a lead, and then they hit an empty net. So it was tough for Seifert because, again, he did his job. He deserved a win. And then we saw what happened in Pagula, where they played that ridiculous 6-6 game that ended up going to a shootout, and then Penn State won Game 2 in overtime with Reese Laubach's goal. So I expect nothing different in this game. It's going to be close. And it's just going to come down to who scores that goal in the third period and which goalie makes the more saves.
I am expecting something along the lines of 3-2, Maybe and that might be in regulation. That
Yeah.
might be in overtime. It would not shock me if this one ends up going to overtime and goes with and ends with a golden goal there. I still do like Penn State's chances because of that resiliency, and it's the second series in later in January where, yeah, they go to a shootout, but they win. Yeah, they go to overtime, but they win, and they showed some fight the first time around. Like I said, even though overall you could look back on this and generally say Ohio State played better over the course of those 4 games than maybe Penn State did, or the way that the margin was, right? They dominated the first series as opposed to the second series. But then when you point out those details of who's available, who's not available, and the fact that Penn State just wasn't Penn State. This wasn't the best version of Penn State that they faced. So give me the Nittany Lions in this one, but it is going to take some of that resiliency. Now, I don't want to project too far ahead, but the point I do want to make to finish up the show with you, Eric, is that the Big Ten crown, regardless if Minnesota was going to be in it to the end or not, I still think was very much achievable for Penn State. But now that Minnesota is out of it because they somehow lost to Notre Dame, as we pointed out earlier in the show, Penn State get through Ohio State. You take on most likely Michigan State, but who knows? We preface that Notre Dame could get hot at the right time. However, Penn State, it just becomes all more and more likely that they could just simply punch their ticket, and then there's no at-large debate whatsoever. And the pairwise is a mathematical equation. There is no committee to decide this. They have to fit into the way that the math shows. But if you win the Big Ten tournament, then nothing's up for debate, and they lock their place in. Eric, what is it about Penn State at this point in time that you say they can win the Big Ten tournament? They can beat Michigan State if and when they get to that point. And this is a team that maybe with everything going right could even make a deep run at the NCAA tournament.
I think it's just the results do the talking right now. They've beaten everybody in the second half. So, going into the tournament, it's not like we were saying, oh, geez, they didn't beat Michigan this year, or, they didn't beat Minnesota or didn't beat Michigan State. They beat everybody that's left. So, why not this team? And they made history at Yost. They've made history as a program down the second half, the most wins in the second half of a season in the regular season to put themselves in this position. And Aiden Fink, who's now leading the country in points and points per game, set a program record for points in a season with 51 after having a 4-assist night Friday night in that win. He's still tied for the goal record, so you expect that one's going down too. He's still sitting on 23, but I can't imagine he ends his season sitting on 23 goals. So they're playing great hockey, and they're playing complementary hockey. So, they're getting some kills shorthanded. They're scoring power play goals. Not every time they have a man advantage, but they're getting 1 or 2 per game, and that's key. You need those special teams to help win games. They're getting the saves from Sergeyev. They're getting depth scoring at times. Ben Schoen, we didn't talk about him yet, but what an unbelievable weekend for him at Yost, where a couple seasons ago he suffered the catastrophic lower body injury. Never thought, maybe thought he wasn't ever going to play hockey again. Then this year, back at Yost, game 1, first shift, 20-something seconds in, takes a hit, and then ends up leaving the game with an upper body injury. He doesn't play the rest of the weekend. So last 2 times he's played in that building, he's left the ice injured. And then this weekend has an unbelievable series, racks up points, scores goals, just a great feel-good moment for him. So you get a guy like him scoring a couple goals too, and then you know what you're going to get from your top 2 lines offensively. You say, why not this team? There's no reason they can't do it. You win this game against Ohio State, now you're looking either at a trip to Michigan State where you had a great weekend against the Spartans, or you're playing a home game at Pagula against Notre Dame. Who would have thought that was even possible at the beginning of the season? Now, the last time they played in the Big Ten Tournament Championship was against Notre Dame in South Bend. That was the 18-19 season, where it was a situation of winner gets in, loser is the first team out of the NCAA tournament. And unfortunately, Penn State lost that game 3-2, and Notre Dame made the tournament. Penn State was the first team out. They were number 16, and that was a year where being 15 would have gotten you in. And unfortunately, they were on the wrong side of the bubble there. But again, if they win this game, they're in as an at-large at a minimum. But I can tell you, they have their eyes set on getting to that Big Ten championship game and checking off one of their goals for the season.
Yeah, it's more than just about sneaking into the NCAA tournament. I feel like Penn State, that's why we mention it. The Big Ten crown is realistic. Honestly, it should be expected. Like I said, I like their chances against Ohio State, and Eric, you summed it up perfectly, that they've beaten everybody. There isn't a team that they struggle with. There isn't a weakness. Sure, they've lost games. They lost to Minnesota recently. However, Penn State is just peaking at the right time. There isn't a glaring weakness about this team that prevents them from accomplishing anything further than where they've been. And that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Penn State takes on Ohio State on the road in Columbus this Saturday, 8:30 Eastern Time. It's a one-game series, winner take all. It is going to be on the Big Ten Network, but I highly encourage everybody to listen to it with Eric Ohlson and Brian Tripp on the call for Penn State men's hockey. You can stream that over at Go PSU Sports. Eric, thank you so much for the time. Safe travels again, and hopefully you don't have to travel the next time if Notre Dame can do the unthinkable and upset Michigan State. But regardless, let's hope that the season continues in the way that it is and get to recap it and then preview what's next the next time we get to have this conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, just keep winning, and we'll keep talking about it.
And again, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day, your number one daily Penn State sports podcast. For your second listen and watch, you got to check out Locked On College Basketball with hosts Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. March is here, so be the most informed college basketball fan throughout all of the madness. You can find Locked On College Basketball available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.